Whenever Xiaorong argued with Si Chini, he always brought up the past, especially when she mentioned divorce. He'd pull out the old story, mocking her in that cold, sarcastic way of his. Back then, you did everything to trap me, even going as far as drugging my drink with an aphrodisiac. And now, you treat me like trash, can't wait to never see me again. Si Chini was an idol, blessed with a face that could charm a nation. Spoiled by girls back in school and then by his fans, he had become insufferably arrogant. Though he presented a well-mannered facade to the public, Xiaorong knew his temper was awful. Sometimes he spoke in such a sarcastic way that you could barely follow his insults. He was extremely confident in himself. When he found himself naked next to her that morning, he immediately assumed she was the fan who had drugged him. Xiaorong had just been unlucky, staying at Bai Ming's vacation house in Qinghai. Si Chini had been filming nearby, and since he was good friends with Bai Ming, he had a key to the place. In a panic, trying to escape the effects of the drug, he had burst into the house and hidden in the bathroom, hoping a cold shower would calm him down. She had heard the noise and came to check, only to be shoved into the bathtub, where he pinned her down, refusing to let her escape. He had kissed her fiercely, his arm locking her beneath him. Even though she was the one who had been taken advantage of, he had the audacity to act as though he were the victim. Xiaorong had tried to explain, "I've seen your dramas and concerts. Sure, I'm a fan, but I would never do something like this. It's our first time meeting, and we're both Bai Ming's friends. I'm not a teenage girl. I wouldn't have such wild fantasies about you." No matter what she said, he wouldn't believe her. He was convinced. You're the one who benefited in the end. If it wasn't you, who else could it have been? It was as if, in his eyes, every woman was irresistibly drawn to him. She never imagined their situation would lead to marriage. When Bai Ming found out, he was furious on her behalf, pressing Si Chini hard. Then, the media caught wind of something, and rumors exploded everywhere. Under pressure from all sides, they had no choice but to compromise. Their marriage was only for the sake of public opinion, to protect Si Chini's image. Maybe it also helped save Xiaorong's reputation, just a little. From the beginning, Xiaorong had no faith in their marriage, and sure enough, they were now on the verge of divorce. She didn't want to waste any more time. If even Zhang Buji and Nicholas Tse could get divorced, why should she hesitate about leaving a marriage she had been forced into? At worst, she'd return to her small-time scriptwriting career. Si Chini had always belittled her as a third-rate writer, claiming she'd never make it big. As for Si Chini's image as a loyal, long-suffering husband, he didn't seem to care, so why should she? But Si Chini was so busy that he was practically a ghost. Even when they had agreed to discuss the divorce details, she waited for 2 hours, but he didn't show up. When she proposed the divorce, he'd agreed quickly enough. He'd thrown a few sarcastic remarks her way, but he didn't make it hard for her. Still, he insisted they talk about the details. Si Chini was always a master negotiator. She remembered how, when they first got married and he was still fuming, he had pointed at her and said, "Don't think you can get anything out of me." He had laid down so many rules, like no public displays of affection. Xiaorong had no intention of arguing with him. Whatever he said, she agreed to. At one point, he thought she was planning something bigger. But when she continued to avoid the spotlight and lead a quiet life, he finally relaxed. They actually managed to live peacefully under the same roof for a long time. Xiaorong sat hugging her knees, watching the same movie for the third time. Exhausted and drowsy, she finally gave up on waiting for Si Chini to come home. Bai Ming's girlfriend, Xiaoqin, had once complained to her, "Dating a celebrity means a lot of waiting." It was true. With one show after another, the more popular a star was, the less personal time they had. Free time was like cleavage you had to squeeze to make it appear. On their first anniversary, they had tried to celebrate. They booked a restaurant, but she ended up waiting for 3 hours. Then he called, saying he had a last-minute appearance to make. After that, she stopped expecting much from this superstar. Hugging her pillow, she went back to her bedroom to sleep. In the middle of the night, she vaguely sensed him coming home, humming happily to himself. He smelled of fresh soap when he crawled into bed beside her after his shower. Half asleep, she pushed him away. "I'm too tired. Not tonight." But Sichini never took no for an answer. His hand slipped inside her nightgown. She resisted a little more forcefully this time, and he scowled, acting all high and mighty when we're not even divorced yet. Xiaorong was already angry. With the divorce imminent, she couldn't be bothered with him anymore. Lying there stiffly, she muttered, "Do whatever you want." That killed his mood. Grumbling, he said, "Like lying next to a corpse. It makes me sick." He turned over, his back facing her. She knew he wasn't asleep. His shoulders were still moving up and down in frustration. To be honest, Xiaorong had put up with a lot from him. After spending so much time pretending to be the perfect gentleman in public, he let loose his real temper with her. Whenever something didn't go his way, he wore his signature, "I'm mad, and the consequences will be serious" expression. Once, over a role in a drama, he gave her the cold shoulder for an entire week. It was nothing major. He had been competing with another actor for the role, and she, being unbiased, had voted for the other guy, favoring acting over looks. Even though her vote didn't stop him from landing the role, it still soured his mood. During an interview, a reporter asked him, "Were you upset that your wife voted for the other actor?" Sichini, ever the gentleman, replied, "That's her script. She has her own ideas about who fits the role. If she had been biased because we're married, that would have upset me even more." What a load of crap. When he got home, he slammed the door so hard the walls shook. She ignored him, calmly peeling an apple while watching TV. Suddenly, he stormed over and switched off the TV. "It's too loud." Then, he snatched her apple and tossed it into the trash. The crunching is annoying too. Xiaorong had always given in to him. As long as he wasn't being overly unreasonable, she wouldn't argue with him. In a marriage like theirs, with no emotional foundation to rely on, causing a scene would only make headlines for the paparazzi. That would be embarrassing for both of them. She retreated to her room to work on her script, but he snuck up and slammed her laptop shut. The typing is even more annoying. Messing with her work crossed a line. She snapped, "If you touch my laptop again, I'll post a picture of your sulky face online." Sichini's carefully curated image as a sweet and compliant idol was his weak spot. He knew her weak spot too, her precious laptop. She had once told him, "If a robber came, I'd protect my laptop first." He had called her an idiot for it. He stormed out of the room, and she thought that was the end of it. But no, he dug out their prenuptial agreement and waved it at her. "Look here, Clause 52. You are not allowed to reveal anything about my personal life to the public without my permission." The agreement originally had just 38 clauses, but thanks to his constant amendments, it now had over 70. Most of the rules seemed trivial to Xiaorong, but they were clearly important to Sichini. Their Cold War lasted for almost 2 weeks, until Sichini finally backed down. Or maybe he didn't really back down. He had picked up a role in a comedy, and it seemed to have rubbed off on him. Suddenly, he was all smiles, happy as can be. When he was in a good mood, Xiaorong actually benefited. He'd even agree to bring home autographs for her when she asked. So, Xiaorong lay in bed, feeling a bit anxious. What if Sichini, frustrated by his unfulfilled desires, tried to make things difficult for her and kept dragging out the divorce? That would be a serious loss for her. "Hey, I'm not sleepy anymore," she nudged his shoulder. He seemed to be asleep, completely unresponsive. Xiaorong felt like she was asking for trouble by saying that. Since he was asleep, she decided not to bother him. But just as she was about to turn over, he suddenly sat up and shouted, "Now I'm sleepy. I'm not in the mood at all." Yet, from the way he looked, he seemed more than energetic enough to run a few laps around the track. She said, "Why don't you sleep later? Let's discuss the divorce first. I've got 3 interviews and 5 scenes to shoot tomorrow. Do you really think you can afford to waste my beauty sleep?" Xiaorong, in a gentle tone, began flattering him. "You're naturally beautiful. Even if you didn't sleep for 3 days and 3 nights, it wouldn't affect your breathtaking looks." There was some truth in her words. Sicheny was indeed extremely handsome, like someone straight out of a painting. Every year, he was voted as the #1 heartthrob in girls' dreams. He was also very particular about self-care. His collection of creams and face masks far exceeded hers, and it was as if he'd eaten some immortal elixir. He didn't seem to age. He constantly looked down on Xia Rong for washing her face with just water, saying her eyelid wrinkles were deep enough to trap mosquitoes. She honestly believed that if it weren't for his looks, his mediocre acting skills wouldn't have made him famous. Sicheny, for his part, loved hearing compliments, especially from someone like Xia Rong, who didn't seem the type to lie. He pretended to fix his hair and said, "Fine, I'll spare a little time for you so you don't accuse me of refusing the divorce." But by the time she returned from the study with all the paperwork, he was already fast asleep under the covers. Xia Rong found it both amusing and exasperating. She admired Sicheny for one thing. He could fall asleep in under a minute, unlike her, who tossed and turned for hours because of the thoughts swirling in her head. At first, he'd complained that her rustling around in bed disturbed him, and after a fight, they ended up sleeping in separate rooms. It was amazing how even the paparazzi managed to dig up their private bedroom details and plaster them all over the news. She had given him a pair of noise-canceling earplugs, and with those, he couldn't hear a thing. Grudgingly, he'd issued her a pardon, allowing her to sleep in the same bed as him. It wasn't that he was bothered by her noise. He just didn't like the sight of her and always found excuses. People with severe insomnia, like her, were the ones affected by noise. Someone like him, who could slip into deep sleep in under a minute, would never be disturbed. Sleep problems were an affliction of the young, those who spent their days immersed in the poetic and romantic. She placed the divorce papers on the nightstand, set an alarm, and planned to wake up before Sicheny, hoping to catch him at breakfast for a talk. But for some reason, the alarm didn't go off. She overslept, and Sicheny had already left for the set. "Damn it," she muttered, frustrated as she hopped around on the bed. The more she needed to talk to him, the busier he seemed. Last week, he was practically invisible, and this week, even when she caught him, their schedules never aligned. It had been almost a month since they started discussing divorce. If they kept dragging it out, the resistance from all sides would only grow. Just as she was thinking that, Baiming called, immediately interrogating her. "Are you divorcing Sicheny?"
Why?
"Do you realize you can't divorce him?" Honestly, she had no idea, but she was determined to go through with it. Baiming's voice was firm. "I guarantee you, if you two divorce, even the government officials will step in to stop you." He wasn't exaggerating. Sicheny was like a national treasure on the island. He was the spokesperson for several charitable and environmental organizations, the island's tourism ambassador, and had even attended national events with the foreign minister. Xia Rong vividly remembered one banquet where a minister had earnestly said, "Xia and Si, you two are the island's golden couple. If anything happens between you, the people will lose their faith and love." It wasn't easy for her. A marriage she was merely tolerating had somehow come to represent the entire island's hopes and dreams about love. Baiming's accusation left Xia Rong speechless for a while, but there were always solutions. She said, "Fine, we'll divorce in secret. Look at that one couple, they got married, divorced, and kept it from everyone for a long time. Why do you insist on divorcing?" That was the wrong question to ask. Xia Rong calmly replied, "It's not that I want the divorce. It's a conclusion Sicheny and I reached after 2 years of marriage." No matter what Baiming said, she had a counterargument ready. In the end, he got so frustrated that he yelled into the phone, "Xia Rong, don't think I don't know what you're up to. You like Sicheny. This is just your pride getting in the way." She angrily slammed the phone down, and still feeling unsatisfied, yanked the phone cord out of the wall for good measure. As Xia Rong brushed her teeth in front of the mirror, she grew increasingly frustrated. She furiously scrubbed her teeth, her words muffled by the white foam in her mouth. "Who likes him? How could I possibly be interested in someone so fake, temperamental, and vain with nothing but good looks to offer?" After getting ready, She grabbed her bag and headed straight for Sichini's film set. Halfway there, she reconsidered, thinking it would look awkward to show up empty-handed, so she doubled back and bought a dozen donuts, pretending she was just dropping by for a visit. When she arrived, Sichini was in the middle of filming a scene. Xia Rong distributed the donuts to the crew, and someone joked, "Look at you two, so lovey-dovey. Didn't you just part ways this morning? Now you're already missing him." She smiled vaguely. "I just wanted to see how he's doing with his acting." One of the clauses in Sichini's contract was no public displays of affection. He didn't allow it, and she didn't have the desire either, so she rarely visited his set. He was filming a historical drama, and his flowing costume made for quite a spectacle. She wasn't sure if he noticed her or not, but he was still holding the lead actress in his arms long after the scene had ended. She turned to the person beside her and muttered, "His acting isn't that great." Just then, the director yelled cut, and the scene wrapped up. The person she had been talking to shouted excitedly, "Chini, Xia the screenwriter says your acting sucks." No words could express Xia Rong's feelings at that moment. "Dude, really? No need to snitch like that." Sichini, unfazed, kept a smile on his face as he glanced at her sideways. "Criticism and praise are equally valuable to me. Praise is recognition, and criticism motivates me to improve." Xia Rong's hair practically stood on end. She remembered the time when they had no desire for a honeymoon, but Baiming had forced them onto a plane to a remote mountain. He was already in a foul mood, and as they trudged through the wilderness, she was full of complaints. Eventually, it escalated into personal attacks, with her casually criticizing a few of his dramas, saying his acting was awful. Back then, Sichini didn't respond with that same polite phrase. In the middle of the desolate mountains, without a soul in sight, he had no reason to keep up appearances. He suddenly stopped in his tracks, causing her to bump right into his back. She yelped in pain, and he lifted her chin, gazing deeply into her eyes. "Xia Rong, very few people ever criticize my acting. Most people just don't tell me the truth. But you're the only one willing to be honest with me. You've really struck a chord in my heart." His face drew closer to hers, his lashes and breath so near they brushed against her like a spring breeze. She was so terrified she didn't dare move, her heart pounding like thunder, and she almost forgot to breathe. His lips brushed past hers, close to her ear, where he whispered harshly, "If you ever say my acting is bad again, I'll make you pay for it." She had collapsed to the ground, and Sichini had smirked, saying, "For a second there, did you think I was going to kiss you? How about that? My acting's not so bad after all, right?" Xia Rong could only nod in agreement. Now, she had that same feeling, like she was in for something unpleasant. Sichini casually picked up a donut and took a bite, frowning slightly. "Too sweet. Tell the baker to use less honey next time." Even though he didn't like the sweetness, he still ate the entire donut. This unusual behavior made Xia Rong anxious. "I just remembered I have a deadline to meet. I'll be heading out." But as soon as she reached the parking lot, Xia Rong hesitated. She had come to discuss the divorce, so why let him scare her off now? This was a rare opportunity. He wouldn't be able to cause a scene in front of so many people. With that thought, Xia Rong regained her confidence and went back to the set. Just as she was about to sit down, the director called out, "Xia the screenwriter, you're still here. Come over and demonstrate a kiss scene for us. Let the actors learn a thing or two." Was it too late to escape now? She was pushed in front of Sichini, with all eyes on her. The director rambled on. "It needs to be deep, filled with unspoken love, painful, torn between desire and fear of losing it." This was way too complicated. Sichini wrapped his arm around her waist, smiling slightly. "Director, no problem." She struggled a little and whispered, "Don't take this chance to get back at me." "You know," he whispered back into her ear, his breath warm, "I'm all about payback." With that, his lips descended on hers, silencing her words. He didn't just go through the motions. He pried her teeth apart, his tongue snaking inside like a serpent, tracing every corner of her mouth. She felt as though she had been swept away by a storm, barely able to stand. Without realizing it, she clung to his waist, her nerves and every inch of her body melting into the kiss. When Xiaorong opened her eyes slightly, Sicheni's face was inches away, his long lashes fluttering like a chaotic dream. This man. In that moment, Xiaorong realized. Baiming was right. She did like him. Her pride, her self-respect, they couldn't tolerate being with a man who didn't love her in return. She pushed Sicheni away just before the tears spilled from her eyes and ran off before anyone could see. But her expression, the redness in her eyes, none of it escaped Sicheni's notice. He stood there, stunned, as someone nearby hesitantly asked, "Cheni, was Xia the screenwriter crying?" Chun-Yi had never seen Xiaorong cry before. When she cut her finger while chopping vegetables, she didn't cry. When he played ghost to scare her, she didn't shed a tear. Even during their honeymoon, when he left her alone in the mountains despite her terrible sense of direction, she still didn't cry. He scratched his head, feeling a bit defeated. If word got out that Chun-Yi made someone cry with a kiss, what would people think? Even Xiaorong herself didn't know what to make of it. It was like she was harboring a massive secret, carrying a sense of dread every day. She especially dreaded running into Chun-Yi, worried that he'd ask, "What's going on? Weren't we just demonstrating a kissing scene? Why did you run away?" She wouldn't know how to answer. Xiaorong was somewhat relieved that Chun-Yi had been so busy lately, barely having time to catch his breath. But that day, he came home surprisingly early, face dark as if ready for interrogation. "Was my kiss really that bad? You better explain yourself." She was holding her laptop, ready to find a quiet spot to gather her thoughts, completely unprepared for him to come home at that hour. Feeling guilty, she stammered, "Of course I knew we were just demonstrating a kiss scene. I just thought of my late grandmother at that moment, and sadness overcame me." He looked skeptical. "Why would you think of someone dead while kissing me?" She racked her brain, but couldn't come up with an answer. Luckily, at that moment, Chun-Yi's stomach growled, and he looked absolutely famished. Xiaorong seized the chance to change the subject. "You should go out and eat. There's a new Thai place on South Street. I've already eaten, and we can discuss our divorce after you get back." "What's the point of eating alone?" He raised an eyebrow in dissatisfaction. In the end, Chun-Yi graciously allowed her to bring her laptop along while he ate, so the two of them strolled slowly toward the Thai restaurant. Xiaorong had no doubt that with him across from her, she wouldn't be able to write a single word. As they passed a dark alleyway, suddenly, a figure jumped out from the shadows and snatched her laptop right off her shoulder. She yelped in surprise, and Chun-Yi immediately took off after the thief. At 6'2", with long legs, Chun-Yi sprinted effortlessly while Xiaorong, trailing behind, was quickly out of breath. The thief ran through several streets, but Chun-Yi stayed right on his tail. In desperation, the thief tossed the laptop into the river. Xiaorong felt like her world was crashing down. She screamed, but before she could even react, Chun-Yi had jumped into the river without hesitation. "Chun-Yi!" She cried out from the railing, forgetting all about the fleeing thief. Chun-Yi emerged, drenched, holding her laptop aloft, muttering, "I told you we should have driven, and now look." She stared at him in shock, her heart still racing from the incident. Seeing her state, Chun-Yi finally showed a bit of sympathy. "It's fine. We'll dry it with a hairdryer when we get back. Your precious laptop will be just fine." Her face was pale. "Why did you jump in like that?" He seemed annoyed. "Didn't you know I could swim? Don't think I did it for you. I just didn't want you to lose sleep over a broken laptop, which would end up disturbing my sleep." Contrary to his assurance, the laptop wasn't fine. After blow-drying it for a while, it still wouldn't turn on. Chun-Yi came out of the shower to find her looking at him for help. He lazily sank into the couch and said, "Don't waste the blow-dryer. Come here and dry my hair instead." "What about my laptop?" she asked. "Women, always making a fuss. It's not the end of the world. Just take it in for repair tomorrow," he scoffed. He chuckled. "Weren't you the one who said to protect the laptop first if we ran into a robber? But you froze, and then you ran so slow." If it were up to you, that thief would have made off with it. Xia Rong sincerely said, "So thank you." He smiled, satisfied. She went around the couch to dry his hair. He was picky. Even drying his hair wasn't just about the blow dryer. She had to massage his scalp with her fingers and style it to his liking. The room was cozy with the warm air from the heater, and after a while, Cheney suddenly said, "I'm hungry." She remembered he hadn't eaten yet. "I'll make you some noodles. You'll have to make do." He immediately objected. "No noodles. Then starve." "It's too late for any restaurants to be open," she retorted, heading to the kitchen. But before she could get far, Chen-Yi tugged on her wrist, pulling her into the couch beside him. He leaned in, whispering, "I want to eat you." Then, his soft lips were on hers. This kiss was different from the rushed, stormy one during the filming. It was warm, gentle, like soft clouds of cotton candy. The last time he kissed her like this was a year ago, when she had a fever and was half-conscious while getting in for at the hospital. He had kissed her forehead and eyes so gently, as if she were a fragile piece of porcelain. Later, he said he had never been to the hospital, and she had doubted whether she had dreamed it all up. See Cheney about last time at the hospital. Just as she finally had a chance to catch her breath, he kissed her back, murmuring, "Don't talk." He trailed kisses down her neck, and when Xia Rong woke up, it was already the next morning. She felt like her entire body was falling apart. Last night, it seemed he had whispered something in her ear. He said, "Don't." "Don't what?" No matter how hard she tried, Xia Rong couldn't remember. The space beside her was empty. Si Cheney was gone again. She blamed herself, feeling like she had lost both the battle and the war. With so much time yesterday, why hadn't she taken care of the divorce? But Si Cheney hadn't left. She could hear him humming a tune while he shaved in the bathroom. Hearing the noise, Xia Rong felt a surge of joy. She hurriedly grabbed the documents, barefoot, and ran over. Si Cheney. He was confused by her beaming smile, but he smiled back. "What's with a big grin so early in the morning? Have you lost your mind?" His mood seemed to be great, which relieved Xia Rong. Leaning against the doorframe, she said, "While you have some time, can you look over these documents? There's nothing much to it. We don't have any property disputes or anything, so it should be easy." Si Cheney replied, "I need to finish shaving first. Just leave them on the dining table. I'll change and take a look." She thought everything was going smoothly until he suddenly burst out of the closet, holding a white shirt with an angry look on his face. Before he could say anything, Xia Rong sensed trouble. Even though she didn't yet know what was wrong, the look on Si Cheney's face told her it wasn't good. She had grown accustomed to his unpredictable moods. "I told you that shirt was supposed to go to the dry cleaner, didn't I?" He was furious about a mere shirt, and from Xia Rong's keen observation, it wasn't even one of his favorites. But Si Cheney seemed on the brink of exploding. "Did you put it in the washing machine? Look at it, it was perfectly fine, and now it's ruined." Xia Rong couldn't recall him specifically instructing her about that shirt. Still, she understood the essence of communicating with Si Cheney. Taking the shirt, she smoothed it out, saying, "It's not beyond repair. Just use the steam iron. It'll be as good as new." "Do you think I'm new? Do you think I can wear whatever I want? I'm a popular idol. People even watch what socks I wear. I can't just wear anything like that." Si Cheney had often behaved this way before. 10 minutes before going on stage, if a button popped off his suit, he would refuse to calm down until she delivered a new outfit, wasting an entire day. After bringing him the clothes, she had to pretend to watch him perform from the audience. His standards were maddeningly picky compared to her. But this time, Xia Rong felt he was being unreasonable. Suppressing her annoyance, she said, "It's not like you don't have other shirts. You don't have to wear that one." "I want to wear this one." "Then wear it." "Xia Rong, you've got guts." He stormed out, still in his loungewear. In the midst of Si Cheney's inexplicable anger, Xia Rong again missed a good opportunity. Holding the divorce papers, she shouted at the still shaking door, "If you have guts, don't call me, and don't let Bei Ming call me either." She didn't know yet that he wouldn't wear new clothes until they were washed, and he worried about sponsored clothes being clean or others' clothing potentially carrying germs. If he had guts, let him go to the appointment in his loungewear. Sure enough, half an hour later, Bei Ming called. Xiaorong, Sichini has no clothes at my place. You need to bring him something, or he won't make it to his appointment. I'm busy. Stop joking around. You know his temper. He said he saw you and got in a bad mood, refusing to come home. Do you really want people saying he's acting like a diva, delaying his appointment, or ruining his image by showing up in loungewear? This was one downside to being friends with Bei Ming. He always acted like he was some kind of sage, thinking he could see through everyone, suddenly hitting the nail on the head. Xiaorong grabbed an outfit and took it over. Upon entering, she found Sichini and Bei Ming at the bar, drinking and talking with their backs to her, belittling her. I'm Sichini, the nation's sweetheart. With my stunning looks, how could she want to divorce me? Is she out of her mind? I'm one of those rare good men you can't find even with a lantern. A handsome guy with a house and a car. I'm way better than any of the male leads in her novels. I don't want a divorce. Suddenly, a thunderclap echoed in Xiaorong's mind as she remembered what he had whispered in her ear that time. He said, "Don't get a divorce. Xiaorong, let's not get a divorce." She stood foolishly at the door while he raised a glass with Bei Ming and mumbled, "People always say I'm moody. My happiness, my sadness, my anger. All of it is because of her. My happiness, my sadness, my anger. All of it is because of her." In that moment, countless fragments flashed before Xiaorong's eyes. His joy, his silky face. All of it seemed to have a cause and effect. She remembered wanting a certain female star's autograph, and no matter whether they were on good terms or in a cold war, he would act as if it was no trouble at all to bring it back for her. But if it was a male star's autograph, she'd have to wait until he was particularly happy. For a while, she had wondered why he had suddenly moved to the film set. Now that she thought about it, it was because during that time, she particularly liked acting alongside that flower boy, which made him unhappy as she drooled over the posters of that flower boy every day. He got mad for a whole week after she voted for someone else, but then suddenly, the sun came out again. She thought his temper was strange. Looking back, she remembered telling a director that he had comedic talent, which made him happy. Once, his assistant called her with a tip-off, saying he had been scolded by the director on set and was holding in his anger, telling her to be careful. That winter, she took her keys and was about to escape to Bei Ming's place when, unexpectedly, he returned just as she reached the stairs. She pretended to be waiting for him at the door, and for the whole evening, he seemed in a good mood. At that time, she thought the assistant's message had been wrong. He was in Hawaii for a photo shoot while she happened to be traveling there with friends. They had planned to meet, but suddenly, he changed his mind and returned home without saying a word. It turned out he was unhappy because one of her traveling companions was male. It was she who had shallow sleep and was neurotic, yet he was the one who didn't want to disturb her, so he slept in a different room. Once, she casually mentioned that the suit he wore for a show looked bad. He, while looking down on her taste, called her before going on stage to say, "My nice suit lost a button. How unlucky. Send me a new one." The angriest time was when he got food on the ear warmer she had given him, stubbornly saying, "I couldn't find a napkin to wipe my mouth, so I used this ugly ear warmer." He made her clean it. She thought that ear warmer wasn't worth much and better to just buy a new one, so she threw it away. Later, he disappeared for 2 weeks before showing up again. She thought to herself that this guy didn't even tell her when he went away. It turned out he was sulking at her. Clearly not wanting a divorce, but when she proposed it, she still calmly said, "Okay," then didn't go home for an entire week and pretended to be too busy to come back the next week. Xiaorong felt something swell up inside her, and tears streamed down her cheeks. Suddenly, there was a beep. It was Sichini, drunk, sprawled over the bar, sound asleep. Bei Ming saw her and smiled slightly. "You're here." She quickly wiped her tears. "Wake him up. How can he make it to his appointment looking like this?" That's life, Fox replied. I remembered wrong. He told his manager to push all his appointments today. Xiaorong had always wanted to see what Si Chen-yi would come up with if she brought up divorce again. On the way to a restaurant for dinner, Xiaorong held the documents and said, "You never have time to look at this. I'll read it to you." She read each item one by one and finally asked him, "Got it?" He looked straight ahead. "I focus on driving, so I automatically block out distracting noises." Xiaorong gazed at him in the mirror as he raised his chin. "Could you choose a better time to discuss this? It makes it sound like I don't want a divorce. I've wanted to sign the documents for a long time. It's just that there are too many clauses. How can a busy person like me take the time to read them all?" She smiled. "Then don't read them. Just sign directly." "That won't do. What if there are clauses that infringe on my rights?" Si Chen-yi. "What? Just because you called my name doesn't mean I'll disregard my own interests and sign without reading." Xiaorong laughed softly. "Okay, we can talk about it next time when you have time." She had initially wanted to say, "Si Chen-yi, I love you." But knowing Si Chen-yi during a drive, he might suddenly hit the brakes or confuse the brake with the accelerator. So, she'd wait for the next time.